we do now is go back and start reviewing some of these things to get, especially we'll start with Perak Hay, and we'll start reading the Pirush Rahut. There's a little bit more in here, plus to switch over to the back where we were yesterday, the Seder Kavanas Lil HaSeder according to the Rashash. To try to see some of that at the same time. So let's go over to page. This is Shin Pei Daled, page Shin Pei Daled, and I'm going to read a mixture of the Pirush Rahut. I mean, where it's pretty simple, and we'll see if we can get it. There's more to be learned here. It says Drush Hey Hu HaDrush HaChamishi. If you're on page Shin Pei Daled in the Pirush Rahut, he says that. He says. Drush HaChamishim min HaDrushim Oskim be'inyan Chag Pesach be'inyan Gala Mitzrayim be'inyan Pharoh Kuvarnis Boyer Etzleno. He said Ki begalas Mitzrayim Chazer Zer Anpin Lehiyod bebechinas Katnas Kolomer Nishara Bo Rak Mochim the Ivor. So we went through that in some detail. The Nistalko Bebenach of a Mochen the Godless, and he loses the Mochen the Godless. Vaz Locha B'choyim is Pashtim Bo Begufo into his body. Rak HaChamisha Chusadi v'Chamisha Gevurz bebechinas Hadas Shal HaMochen the Katnas. Shenish Arach B'Bechah that remain inside of him. V'Heim Sod Chamisha Domim Deharim. That's the secret of 5 pure blood. So we learned about that in some detail in the previous Prakim. Mitzad Chamisha Chasadim, so there are 5 Tahor by the Chamisha Dun, Chamisha Dam Tameim, Shabaisha, Vehem Sod Masha Amr Pasuk, Ve'ever V'Alayach, Ve'erach, Mispossessed B'Damayach, that phrase over there, Hainu, Shnei Mini Damim. So we went through that. We talked about the 2 different types of Damim, and the Skarim, Gasha, and his boyer, called Zechel the El Sham. So we'll read a mixture of the 2 when there are some ideas in here that are worth going back again, because I get a little confused. We went through the whole idea, and we'll just look at some of the details. Mitzad Ava ve'eser ekye heim besod acharayim. So then there's also this in the form of the acharayim. He's talking about what the blood was. A little review on that. Aleph K, Yud, etc. Ha'olin kaminyan dam. With all of that those ekyas are going to be dam. So he says, let me see, v'hine eser chavayos heim chamish chasadim. And then he says, and the gevuros are going to be these dams. So ba'olam kaminyan dam shehem eser damim, and iskarm. Those are the 10 dams that we're talking about. Chamish chasadim, chamish gevuros. On page 10, page 12 now. He says mitzad ima shabadas the zer anpin, and then he says v'az paro shuhu soda orif is the concept of the back of the neck. He says also representing the klipas of Mitzrayim Anikra came al shemakum unikasam. They're sucking off of that neck, which is the place where the chasadim v'avuros, where das is located. So he says shemakomo shemakum unikasam who neged the gorum. What's in the gorum? So he says the gorum. So it's really the narrow place, the low, narrow place, where you see that this the Shlosha Shemus Elokim are found. Gamshuhu Keneged the Makom Das, and it's also near the place called Das. So he said V'Ushtecha Klipos on his karo. So there are 2 different klipos. Hoya Yonkim Misham. The Haidach of Mishemus Elokim Asher Bisham. V'lechein koyim misha'avdim as yisuchot shechoy bebechinas begam b'das, which represent the begam b'das. V'yinika zucha b'choyset davka b'galas b'tzroyim. So this particular situation, sucking off of the neck like that, that narrow place where the das is located, is unique to Mitzrayim. V'hiyosa chasana v'chavuras ahem b'garim, because that's where they're found now. Shesham Shor Shadas, that's the root of the Das. Misham Techilas Habispashtusa beguf, and that's where it starts to go into the body. Kilucha b'choyim mochin, the godless kadei lidchos as shemus Elokim. So this is just strictly the situation where you just have continence there. The continence, the makomen shabadas, connected the garam lehis pasha beguf ulamata. Going on. So this is wallowing in the blood. Mace, and he says it could be all broken into two words, mace and bosesses. Rotzalomer ki haklipa chanik was mace. Mitam shachamemes hu avi avosatuma kamuch haklipa shehi darga demusa. He min hasigim, because it's made out of waste projects. Olam and the kudim shemesum that come out of this is left over from the olam and the kudim where there was the mises of the malachim. Hoisabel says so Veromeses as you saw, so they were wallowing in, I guess, and swarming over the Jews. And holds on to that. Ratzalomer base damim shehem shnei mini damim kalomer damim teharim sheshoshem heim chamish chasad deiba v'dam temeim sheshoshem heim chamesh gevuros, which are 5 gevuros. Is there a bit the ibach and nizgar? A bit says yisachah mibitzoyim. Shu remes the Yitzias a Chasada the Kavurs the God the Memetzach Agon, which is a remes to that. That's going out of it, being able to get out of there. V'yardur b'sham v'nispashtach a Chasada the Kavurs the God that's in his karm, and then everything becomes unblocked. Lamata beguf. So he said al yedecha kadisas amochan the God that's b'zer anpin. Then the blood stops. These bloods we're talking about, the katnas. So he says they stop this flow into the other side. That is the Pharoh Mitzrayim. That are sucking off of the place of das. The Yanik Mechem v'oz. Ki also Chasana v'Kavur shachay b'techila b'gar rachusha b'sham b'makam yedikosim, yard of it is pashta the mata b'guf of the zeranpet. Ve'enin imsoim b'od keneged makum yedikosim, so there can't be find there in that neck anymore. Pharoh's going to be gone. Kashachat nizbayr inyan zechad the el. So we talked about that. He says Bezos, I think I skipped something. Bezos Drush Aleph, is that where it is at? For who sowed Havlos Adam and she is Boil Lukamon and Drush Test. There's a test, the 9th test. 9th, there's only 6 here. So let's see, where's number 9? We're going to 9. 9's got to be elsewhere. All right, let's move on a little bit. He says, Leil Pesach Besod the Mochim. We'll go over to the Pirush Rechut instead. He says, the Nimsa the Vikon Mashad is Boyer Adata. That's what's happening on El Pesach. Pesach is that we're in a situation of tremendous continence. Because unique is a clip of the Pharoh Mitzrayim of Mechember v'Shemosam, Hem Shlosha Pamim Shemos Elokim. So this is the name of the klipos. This is the name of the covering of those Mochen Dekadis. Shemos Elokim Harishon who b'milui the Yudin. There's 3 different ways you can see it, as we know. And he shows it to us, and then he says that with the Sheni the milui hahayin who b'muach habina that goes in kvuach habina kazam. He shows it again, and then the last one is the mochen alafim b'muach hadas. So you have these 3 different possibilities. Das seems to go along with the aleph, or that does. So he says, he yos shemuach hadas, the fact that muach das, mischal the shnei cholokim, shehem chasadim gedvoras the das, which represents chasadim and gedvoras the das. The chein yesh b'muach hadas shnei shemos elokim b'milui alofen. There's 2 different ones that you have in milui alofen, because when you come down to the 3rd one, v'chachidach shebenechem is this. Here osa aleph. Remember over here. The Mochen the Kadnas we're talking about, the Os Hadas Shechavilui Hey, kasher bechu b'tzir yud vav yud hu b'chusadim. So Sha'ar also Aleph Niskarim is b'tzir yud vav dalad, which also we know this, saw this in the Yotzes Chaim, and here it is over here. He said the das v'ayedech b'shinu tzuras Aleph are changing that the tzur of this. Where are we? So I lost the place. He says, "V'al yedech b'shinui tzuras al zu yesh arba b'mini chafanim milui shem Elokim." So now there are 4 different ways. There's one for each one of the mochadekadnas, but ba'arba mochadekadnas. Ki lulei shinui tzuras zu. So if you didn't have the change in the aleph itself, so he says now you see that each one has its special milui of Elokim, and this in regards to the situation, I guess, before the godless comes in. So and we'll go on. Now we'll just keep moving on. He has an explanation. I think a lot of it we know, so we'll see what we could do. Now let's go to matzah. He said, "Matzah shtei mochen dezer anpin hanikroim chochma bina." Now, how does this work? He said that it's two mochen. The mochen of chochma bina is represented by the matzah. Ki gemosha she is boyer yesh remesh b'binyan matzah l'shnei mochen edu davka. Vafal piso. He said, well, let me just read it again. Ki Moshe is boyer, as we're going to explain. There is a hint over here b'binyan matzah with the gematria of matzah. The Shnei Mokim Edu Davka on these. Va'afal Pikein Umikol Shekain Umikach Yesh Lanu Lilmod Limros Shehem Shel Kadness. We're talking about Kadness, the Chochma B'Bina and Niskarim, because those Ein Sham B'Chochma Bina Shum Machizach Alaklipos. So why can't the Chochma Bina part become attached to the Klipos? Even in that case, call achizas aklipos who davka bebechinas akatnas shall moachadas. So that's where they actually can get when you're in that situation. Ki mishor shachusade v'chagavur shabach b'nimshach bechinas achametz v'chasor k'lokoman, which we are about to the root there, where the chasadim gavurs get out, and then you have the possibility of chametz and the possibility of sore grabbing hold of them. Nikros, so therefore it's called by this name Nikros matzah shmura. So what is matzah shmura? Al shem mochem chachma bebina, which is the mochem of chachma bebina are guarded. Masha ein came b'muach adas. So he wants to say, draw the difference between the two. Now, I'm a little confused because he said that the matzah represents Chochmah Bebina. And now he comes over here, and they're not affected. That's the matzah, which is Shemura. Al Shem Amochim Chochmah Bebina, Masha Ein came B'muach Das, which we go over to that, because this is the Das, is the place where, what is Das anyways? Your thinking power, your ability to digest the thought, perhaps. That's not flowing. Which he's going to explain. We're going to see that again. He says, "Ki hamata who romas the muach chochma b'bina bilvad," because matzah just refers to those two. V'zeh shemura min hamazikin, that part is not being damaged of a yonking rock memocha das, because the other side can only get a hold of the das. Chochma and bina are on too high a level. Now his statement was that the matzah represents those two. Matzah mishmura. So those mochin of katnus are not affected, apparently. Moshe Darshan Zachron of the V'Racho al Pasuk Leil Shemurim Kul Hashem Asher wrote Saloma Shebeleil Pesach Kashenitnasim Mochin the Godless, when Mochin the Godless come in. V'oz mispashten v'yordim v'chasaret damim go for the zer anpen, that causes the log jam to break up and start flowing downstream. And so once the godless comes in, that's going to solve a lot of problems. So he said, so he says, if you add 72 and 63, you get to the gematria of Masa, which is 135. So he says that's what those two add up together. So Shem Shemus Avaya B'Milu Yudin, Ubamilu Yudin v'Aleph, and then those are the two. So if you add them up, you see that's what they are. Shehem Ramazin L'Sod says Chochma or Bina. They're a reference to that concept that Av represents Chochma and Sag represents Bina. That's a reference to them. Shehem Shtei Chamochem Al Yonim and the Dasa Shechu Sham Talmud Yesh Mida B'Yunikas Klipas, because there is always that. So let's see. It's now we're at the halfway mark to this, and let me stop